So Bob Barker and I were having a talk, and he told me that he needed a better, more secretive place to put some of his prized possessions. He didn't feel comfortable just leaving them out. So we had a discussion. I told him, hey, Bob Barker, you can just put them in this drawer right here. And he just didn't feel that was good enough. So here's what we came up with. So now we got a good spot for some of his prized possessions here that most people won't find. So let's get into the build. So for this project, I'm just using a bunch of the scraps that I had from prior projects, and I had plenty enough to get it done. I just needed to pick the right ones. So we got some sizes that fit the bill here, and then I cut them down to size just using my cross-cut sled. No particular reason why I use this instead of just the table saw. I just kind of felt like it. But it got me good exact sizes using the stop there, and we got all the sides cut out for the initial part of the drawer. So for the sides of it, it's going to be much bigger than the front and the back, so that's why these pieces look a little bit different. And after we get those cut out, then we can do a quick little dry fit so you can see that part is where the secondary drawer goes through. So for here, I just put it together and marked out where those dados need to be for the bottom of the top drawer. And I used this little setup block to get my dado stack where I needed and use the line to set my fence, and then we're ready to go. So we cut these dados through both of these pieces. And then after that, we're ready to make sure it all fits together. So we put the 1/2 inch piece on the bottom. Now I wanted to go a little bit thicker with that part because I'm going to be screwing some of the connector stuff to that later. And the rest of the drawer is made out of 3/4 inch plywood. So I decided just to do some pocket holes to attach the front and back. I'm not really sure if I would do that again. You'll see later on because some of the pocket holes are exposed when the drawer opens. So then after I get those ready, we go ahead and sand it down and get ready to assemble the drawer. So we just apply some glue to all the joints. And for this one, it was a little bit of a tight fit once I put the glue in there. So I got my rubber mallet just to persuade it a little bit. After that, it fit really nicely. So then we just go ahead and put the other side on. And then with that, we're ready to put in the front and back pieces. And like I always do, I throw on a little bit of glue on the sides, and then I will add some clamps on there just to make sure it doesn't move when we're screwing in these pieces. And I usually do about 2, on this side of the drawer, I'll do 2 pocket holes on each side. And I usually like doing it this way because typically the front and back of your drawer box is never going to get seen because when you put on the drawer face and then it obviously covers it, but since this one is going to be opening up, then these pocket holes right here will end up being visible. So we'll fix that later. And I want to get the most space possible out of each one of these drawers. So for these ones, I'm just going ahead and just butting it straight up to the rest of the box. And we countersink and screw those in. And then we're going to be making the small drawer for the inside part. And for this one, we're just going to go ahead and cut down all our pieces on the table saw. And just like we did with the other box, we clamp it up and screw it all together using those pocket hole screws. And for this one, you won't see those ones. They'll be completely covered once the build is complete. And like I said, I'm trying to maximize the space here. So on the very bottom one, I'm just using a 1/4 inch piece of plywood. And don't ask me why I decided to cut it on my table saw, but that's just what I decided at the time. But it still worked out okay. I'm not really sure that's the most optimal method, but it worked out for this time. So with that done, go ahead and get rid of the scraps, and I do just a light hand sanding because the veneer on this plywood is much thinner than the other ones. So I didn't want to use my regular sander for it. Then, just like before, we just countersink it and screw it into place. However, as I'm doing it, a thought occurs to me right about here. I realize that the depth of this drawer actually isn't big enough for the lock that I'm going to be using, but I figure I'll just keep on going and I'll figure out a way around it. So once those are all in, I just go ahead and put the lock that I'm going to use right in the center of the drawer where I'm going to be using it, and then I just took a bunch of scrap pieces and I just kind of made a template that just butted around the lock here using an excessive amount of tape there to keep it in place. And then after that, I drill a hole through there so my router bit can get through there, and I just use a flush trim bit to kind of slowly get around those edges. It ended up working out pretty well. We were able to get pretty much the exact shape of the lock that I'm using, and that way it can kind of sit a little bit below the surface because I wanted the top to be flush with the top of the drawer. So when I did that, it got a good shape, but I needed to still cut out those little corners because it doesn't go all the way through yet. So I just use my jigsaw just to kind of finish off those little edges. So after I get that all squared off, then we can do a quick test fit. And you can see here what I mean, like it needs to go below the bottom for that to sit flush up top. And just to make this part look a little nicer, I just did a round over on the edges on the bottom, just so it kind of hides those plywood edges some on that drawer. For this one, it probably doesn't really make a difference, but in general, I think it makes it a little bit nicer. So once we have that inner drawer ready, it's time to put on the slides. So I just kind of marked out the positions of those and put it in place, while Bob Barker is keeping watch to make sure nobody disturbs the very important work, because after all, this is for him. And after we get some screws in there, then we can go ahead and just put this up on its side so we can test out the drawer and make sure it fits properly. And it slides right in really nice. So after we have that in, we want to go ahead and make sure we attach the slides to it after Bob Barker gets some attention, of course. And for this one, it's kind of flush with the bottom of the drawer, so I can just pull it out and line those up and screw those in. And then I take it out just to add a few extra screws into the back that I couldn't quite reach. And so after that, we do another test fit, and it slides really nice. And at that point, I was pretty happy with it, so I just went ahead and got a really great shot of me screwing in the lock. And then we're about to run into our next problem here. So what I wanted to do is just kind of line this up and mark out exactly where I want this to sit underneath the bottom. And because I'm screwing this in, that's why I did a 1/2 inch plywood for the bottom of that drawer. So after we marked it out and screw it into place, then it's time to test fit it again. So I'm trying to put the drawer in, and for some reason it's just not going, and I keep on trying until it dawns on me right about now that the lock mechanism is blocking it. So I set that in place, and we're going to have to notch out the back of the drawer, that way it can slide in. And we get back to our jigsaw again, and we just follow our marks, and this will kind of cut out a little bit of a rectangle shape there on the back, and that'll allow it to slide in and out without hitting it. So after that was finished up, now we can once again try to test fit it. This time it slides in and out really nice and fits properly. So we can move on to putting the drawer slides for the outside part of the main drawer. And for this one, we're just lining up straight up in the middle because that's where the prior drawer was that we're replacing. Then it's on to testing it out in the nightstand itself and seeing how it works. So I put it in place and slides in and out, and now we have to figure out how we're putting on this drawer face. So first thing I wanted to do is just figure out the spacing. So I got some just playing cards here and put those in there just to kind of get the gaps how I wanted it. And while I was doing that, Bob Barker came back to supervise to make sure I do this properly. And the nice thing with those ones, you can really adjust the sizing pretty easily just by adding some extra cards. So then I kind of taped it into place because I'm still trying to figure out how the heck I'm going to do this. I took out the top part, and then I figured I'll just go ahead and clamp this together, because normally what I would do is I would just kind of screw through with the drawer pull hole, but since we're not putting drawer pulls on this one, I couldn't do that. And then I figured with this one, I can't really get to the bottom. I tried some double-sided tape, but it sits back just a little bit, and I had already adjusted the locking mechanism, so I didn't want to do that again. So what I ended up doing is just carefully measuring how much the reveal is on the bottom, and then just match that when I go to screw it in later. So, and it turns out it was about 3/4 the same as my plywood, so I can just put that there, and then I carefully measure the side-to-side distance on that, and then we can add some clamps just to make sure that it doesn't move. And since this one is only going to be screwed to the bottom drawer face and not to the top one, I'm adding 4 screws into this one, even though it's a pretty shallow drawer. I just wanted to make sure that, with use, it's not going to pull out of place. And so next we go ahead and try it again, and it fits in there pretty nice and it stays on. So back into the room to do another test try with this. So we slide it in, make sure everything kind of moves in and out. And then after that, it's time to actually give the mechanism a try. So we pull it out, we use that key card to unlock it, and it works. And Bob Barker was pleased. So to cover up those pocket holes, we're using these plugs, and I kind of lost the footage of me doing that. So you just glue those into place and sand it down. And then since the locking mechanism here goes below the surface, I wanted something to screw it into. So I just added that little block, and then I used a bunch of connectors just to kind of get my angle to screw that into place. And then for this, they can be battery powered, or you can do a USB charger. So later on, I'm going to run that wire underneath there and run it over to a power strip. That way I don't always have to change the batteries on it. So the final step was just putting a little bit of polyurethane on there, and then it's ready to go.
All right, and that's the build. It didn't exactly go as I expected it to. There was a lot of kind of mistakes and bumps along the way, but in the end we got it to work. And this is really more like a working prototype for me because I do want to just remake this entire nightstand. So now I have a better idea of what I need to do to make this drawer work the way I want it to, so I'll make it even better the next time around. So that's going to be it for this time. We'll see you guys in the next one.